Have you got tension issues? Would you like to sort them out? G'day people, I'm Sharyn, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to try and demystify tension on your sewing machine, what it does, what it doesn't do, and maybe you can get on with your machine a bit better because of it. Your thread running through tension discs, if they're very open, the thread just wanders through and it's all loose and floppy. On the other hand, if as it goes through the tension discs it's really, really tight, then you have to pull really, really hard to make it work. Good tension means that the thread goes through evenly and it balances with the tension in the bobbin. Your machine almost certainly came from the manufacturers with the tension set in an automatic or balanced position, and that will work if you're using normal thread, normal fabric, and the machine is threaded properly. I'm ready to sew on this Janome DC3050, which is a basic electronic machine. So I've got needle up down, I've got red thread in the top and blue thread underneath so we can see what it looks like. And I'm going to use these markings here for the start. That's the 15mm or 5/8 inch marking there. And that's the width you would need for seams in the Big 4 patterns. So by using those markings, I am sewing on a line 5/8 of an inch from that cut edge. And that was a default settings stitch. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see or not. I've got blue thread in the bobbin and you may be able to see that it is actually little dots of the blue thread coming to the top. If you look closely enough, there are little tiny bits of the red thread also appearing at the back, and that's a balanced tension. I'm not seeing much of the red thread, but there's a little bit of it there. Here's my second row of stitching, and I'm just going to keep the edge of my foot against that row there. And I'm doing a very long stitch length. Hopefully you can see the difference there. The first row of stitching was 2.2 and the second one is 5. And you can see that those little blue dots of the bobbin thread being pulled up to the surface. There is, believe me, a little tiny bit of the red that can be seen underneath as well. It's hard to pick up here, but it is there. And that's a balanced tension. Stitch length doesn't make any difference to what tension I need to have my machine. Still worked fine, even though it was at more than double the length of stitch. There's 2 layers of fabric. The fabric is what I would call calico, what I think in the United States you call muslin. I'm now going to reduce my tension down to 1 so we can see what it does. We'll have a look on 5 mils first. Let's just see if it makes a difference. It's a bit harder now to see the blue bit, but on the back it's easier to see the red bit, isn't it? So that's what happens when you reduce your tension to a lower number. The place where the 2 threads connect goes down underneath. So moving my tension up, we'll go up to 8. And let's just see what happens. And that blue those blue dots, they are very definitely up there harder now. I can actually feel them on the top, and there's no red underneath at all. So tension will move where the two threads connect. What am I showing you here? Well, in each case, purple is the top fabric, pink is the bottom fabric, red is the needle thread, and blue is the bobbin thread. This one here, where the red and the blue are coming together in the middle, that's the auto balanced stitch on my machine. That is what you expect when you've got a machine from a manufacturer and it's all set. When it arrives with you and you thread it up with nice thread, put a good sturdy fabric in there and you sew. It should be like that, assuming you've got it threaded properly. The threads are balancing each other out and they're coming out in the middle of that layers, those two layers of fabric. If you've got thick fabric, you probably won't be able to see the blue thread from the top or the red thread from the bottom. With thin fabric, you probably will. That's just a function of how close that knot is to the top. This is a lock stitch machine, and that is the lock stitch. That's why it doesn't come undone the way that a hem on a pair of trousers that you've purchased might do. Those ones are done with a chain stitch, and it's one thread and it can pull undone. These are a lock stitch, they don't come undone. So that's what your automatic tension, your balanced tension should look like. If you ran your fingers along it, you're not going to notice anything very much. It's a nice balanced tension. This one here is what happened when I set my tension to 1. At 1, the needle thread came down underneath. It was loose. It came down underneath. And if I ran my fingers along that, I'd be feeling that little bit there, that little knot underneath the fabric. It's a lower tension. And where the knot is lower. And the number is lower. Pays to remember that. If you want it to go down underneath, that join to be underneath, take it to a lower number. This one up here is what I had when I set my tension to 8. The thread along the top was stretched out tightly by the tension discs, and the bobbin thread had to make its way to the surface in order to compensate. So higher number took the join between the two threads up higher. The best way I've ever found to explain what way you need to move your numbers with tension is wherever that is, if you need it to go higher, make it a higher number. If you need it to go lower, make it a lower number. Higher number will move it up higher, lower number will move it down. So I'm just going to sew straight line of stitching with the tension on 8 and then stitch length on 4. It doesn't actually look that much different to normal at this point, but because that tension was so high, instead of the threads sort of meeting in the middle of the fabric, it's pulling the bobbin thread up to the top, and the result of that is that if I grab hold of this needle thread, it's so easy to gather. And that's why we raise the needle tension together. This is also the position it was in when I gathered it. So what happened? That thread stayed straight and I could move everything along on that top thread. That's what gathering does. The reason that it doesn't work well, at least as a single line of stitching, is that all the pressure is being put on that thread up there, and if it breaks, the whole lot comes undone. It's probably a good idea to do at least 2 rows of stitching if you want to do that, and have the stitches set wide. I actually prefer to do my gathering on the overlocker. I'll explain that to you some other time. So there we are. High tension, automatic or medium tension, balance tension, and low tension. We talked about the thread going through the tension discs and how tightly or loosely the tension discs were holding makes a difference. But what else makes a difference? This bit, what's pulling the thread. And in your sewing machine, what is pulling the thread? In almost all cases, it's your fabric. Hey, did you see that? As I was sewing, that fabric was gathering essentially on the threads because the fabric was not strong enough. So for how tight the tension discs were, this was just getting itself pulled closer and closer in because it wasn't strong enough to move along and pull the thread along. That's why if you're sewing with something like denim, you're never going to have, or very unlikely to have, the denim actually gathering up on your thread. But if you're sewing chiffon, it's easy to have it happen. And the way to get around it, you need to provide the tension on the fabric while it stitches, one hand in front, one hand behind the needle, and keep it firm. That's another part of tension that you may not have realised. This is actually the principle that gathering feet work on. They tell you to tighten your needle thread, and the way the foot is designed, it pulls fabric in from the front, but it doesn't encourage it to go out the back. So that is fundamentally what they're using in order to make a gathering foot work. They don't work on stiff fabrics, only lightweight ones. If you're doing free motion quilting, it's likely that you're going to end up with an effect like this, where your needle thread is not pulling up hard enough, and because it's going all the way down underneath, you end up with sort of, they're described as eyelashes. That means that in effect what is required is to loosen the bobbin tension. I would not encourage you to do that. If you do free motion quilting, some machines actually have a separate bobbin case which is set with a looser tension, and that's the one you should use if you're trying to do free motion quilting, because that way you don't change the tension on your regular bobbin case. Janome machines, they have them available as an optional extra. They do come with some of the machines, but a lot of them, they're an optional extra. So if you're doing free motion quilting and you're having a problem where you're trying to do stippling and you're ending up with bits of the top thread coming down underneath, you need to use a bobbin case with lower tension in order to sort that problem out. Right about now, there's probably a whole bunch of you going, but my machine's doing that you've got drawn there at the bottom. What's the tension doing there? Well, it's not actually a tension issue. If you watch my video about the top 5 reasons my sewing machine isn't sewing, number 1 is it's not threaded properly. And that is usually a threading issue. Specifically, it's that the thread is not in the take-up lever, which is the bit that goes up and down above your needle. If it's not in there, the thread goes down, it doesn't get pulled back up, it stays down there. I actually tried to get my sewing machine to do it, it just wanted to knot up when I did it, so I couldn't actually show you the other reasons that this happens is because your needle thread is getting stuck somewhere under the needle plate. There are a number of things it could be getting stuck on, but it could be that there's some damage to the needle plate around where the needle goes down. It could be that there's something wrong with the bobbin case. It could be that there's something wrong with the hook. They're all things that the thread could be just getting stuck on and it can't pull itself out properly, and then it stays underneath. So other reasons that it could be getting stuck down there, maybe it's just a lot of dirt and the thread can't come back up because it's stuck on lint. So damage underneath your needle plate or lint can do that. Another very, very uncommon reason why that might be happening, when you put your bobbin into the bobbin case, top loading bobbin, it should look like a letter P. So the thread is coming off the left side of it, and that's because we're all practically perfect in every way. Put it in, and that's the way it's supposed to be. If you've managed to turn it over and instead of looking like a P, it's looking like a Q, that can sometimes be the result. So there's a few things for you to try. One of the times your tension discs can actually cause problems with your sewing, but it's not a tension problem, is if you manage to get some lint or some thread stuck in the discs, in between the discs, and they're holding the discs open. So instead of the discs holding the thread, it just sort of wobbles its way through. If you're finding that you've got tension weird and changing the dial doesn't seem to work, I would fold a piece of fabric in half and run that folded edge through the tension discs, and hopefully it dislodges any piece of fluff or lint or thread that's stuck in there. I hope you've learned something about tension on your sewing machine, and you and your sewing machine are becoming better friends. See you next time.